Welcome to the DraftKings tight end analysis for Week 6. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay. Taking a look at some cash game GPP and value tight ends this week. Overall, I like a lot of tight ends. I think there's a lot of pricing discrepancies between FanDuel and DraftKings, but I'm pretty much on all the same names here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. Now, I will say, I think Greg Olson's going to get quite a bit of ownership here, especially after last week. I like that play, but now that Cam's going to play, I don't know that I like it quite as much. Is that weird to say?
A little bit. I mean, in terms of the matchup, it's juicy.
Dude went for 150 yards last week with Derek Anderson, and like you saw just how much of, at least when Cam's in there, he like spreads it out, but it was just so clear Anderson was going to Olsen every single time. It was a delight to have any Greg Olsen. I didn't have Greg Olsen, but I was like excited for the people who did. Like it's such an amazing feeling when the backup's in and you just see him go for the first read. But now that Cam's in, he's going to spread the ball out. That means Ted Ginn's in play now. That means, Mike Tolbert's more in play. It means like all these random dudes are going to get theirs. And I like it. I think there are better options even in tier 1.
So is it more of a pricing thing with you then that he's 7K?
Yes. Much more of a pricing thing. I mean, if he was the same price as Delaney Walker, of course, I'm going to pick Greg Olsen. But I mean, I guess we can get right into it. Jimmy Graham and Delaney Walker are my cash game guys. We'll get into Delaney first. 5,500 against this Cleveland team. He's back. Obviously had the early season injury that hinged, his target share down. But you look at the last 2 weeks, he's back. He's getting targeted in the red zone. I mean, the corpse of Andre Johnson keeps snagging these touchdowns, but I don't envision that happening all year. I think Delaney is the guy in the red zone. He's the guy in the passing game against this Cleveland secondary who can't cover anyone. You just like getting main options and offenses for 5,500, generally speaking, and in optimal matchups. So I like this a lot. I don't think you have to pair him with Mariota. I think this is a standalone play. I mean, you can use Mariota. I'm okay with that, but I think Walker as a standalone is really nice.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, we're looking at a Cleveland defense that just allowed 3 touchdowns to Martellus Bennett. They've allowed big games in the past. I mean, Dennis Pitta had a big week against him. So it's not like Bennett really – I mean, Bennett obviously inflated the numbers last week, but they've been bad against tight ends all year.
Yeah, and Gronk had 100 yards. So it's just a bunch of – an onslaught for Cleveland. It's just not their year. So, I mean, 5,500. Again, I think Walker and Graham are viable both. I mean, this is becoming pretty obvious, but if they're viable as cash game tight ends, that probably means they're viable in the flex in any lineup. So certainly worth your time there. The price decrease for what these guys can get in terms of like ceiling is pretty fair. I mean, Delaney can definitely get 20 points. He certainly can get 10 targets in the game. He's certainly viable in the red zone. And honestly, the same thing goes for Jimmy Graham at this stage. Obviously a much more volatile player because he's coming off that injury, because we haven't really seen him in a Seattle uniform for very long. But at only 4,900, as we talk about, the discount for main tight end targets on DraftKings is just so enormous. So I think at 4,900 against this Atlanta team, Jimmy Graham, tremendous option.
Yeah, I like him a bit. I mean, he's a guy who's going to be a lock and kind of a staple for my lineups in the flex and the tight end spot. It's crazy when you come over from FanDuel because it's like Jimmy Graham's 6,900, Delaney Walker's up there in the 6,500 range. Those guys are closing in on like wide receivers of like Jarvis Landry and like Brandon Cooks and Amari Cooper and Crabtree. Like here it's completely different.
It's totally 100% different. And again, the point of this is I'm still paying up for these guys in cash on FanDuel, depending on what slates I'm playing. So I mean, I love these plays. I think they're both cash game viable. I think they're both very viable in tournaments. It's all good for
Yeah.
those two.
In terms of
Um,
GPP, you're looking to pay
yeah.
down here.
Well, I just look at. I think I kind of make my choice with those two. Like we can talk about Greg Olson as we already did. We can talk about Jordan Reed if he plays. I think it's more appropriate in a learning sense to maybe look at some of these mid-tier guys. I think we look at Zach Miller. I mean, been a top 5 tight end since Hoyer's in the fold here. Pretty much every week, getting those targets, getting those red zone looks. Obviously, 3 red zone touchdowns already with Hoyer. I just think the target share's there. I like Cameron Meredith, but I think last week inflates what we view him as. He is an undrafted free agent. He is a guy that hasn't really made much of an impact other than that one game. So I do appreciate what he did last week, but at the same time, I think it is just a one-game sample, especially in terms of target share. Zach Miller's the guy we saw it at the end of last year with Cutler, and we're seeing it right now with Hoyer. He's a great viable option. Someone I'm looking at 3,800 once again, even though honestly it's not even that great of a matchup, but I'm still looking at him at 38.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, it's not the best matchup. I mean, Jacksonville, they rank inside the top 10 and for Football Outsiders against tight ends.
Yeah.
But I mean, the way they line him up, I think Jacksonville has a couple injuries that might make it a much more viable option. But in terms of consistency, it's been hard to kind of get away from.
Yeah, I wrote up the next guy here, Kobe Fleener. He's more just, you're bluffing at the pot. You like string bet, like throw a bunch of chips in and like aggressively at the guy to try to make him fold. This could work out. It's a risky move, but at the same time, Carolina hasn't really been what we think they are in terms of secondary so far. We saw Mike Evans kind of get to him last week. Not saying Kobe Fleener is Mike Evans, but he's a big target that is going to get his fair share as that's appropriate nearing presidential voting time. So try to get your fair share. 3,500 is still just totally inexpensive for what he has shown in upside this year. Is a target in the red zone. If John Kuhn wasn't an absolute savage, he'd have another receiving touchdown on the board. So I like him at 3,500. Certainly better plays on the board, including Zach Miller. But I think as a risk, he does have that 2 touchdown upside at home randomly with Brees.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the ceiling with Fleener, in this offense, but we have a good sample of the floor that comes with it too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's there.
Again, I honestly, I'd say this, you normally don't say 4-game samples is enough. I'd say that's about what we're going to get from him. Some like 1 okay week, 2 just 3 drop, like 8 target, 1 catch weeks, and then 1 like high-end tight end 1 week. That's just going to be what it is.
John Kuhn's not going to come and snag every touchdown away from these guys.
I kind of want him to at this point because
don't say that. Don't say that.
That was incredible. That was one of the best football plays I've ever seen. But
it was robbery. It was fantasy robbery.
Yeah, he was like Robin Hood or something. Charles Clay is my punt, 2,900. I think he's certainly viable against this 49ers defense that can't stop anyone right now. You just look at his role in the offense. Obviously, before Sammy Watkins went down, he was looking to be a really wasted big free agency deal. But at this stage, I'm in. I think he can get 6 to 8 targets if he turns that into 5 catches, 60 yards, and, maybe a touchdown. Even without a touchdown, 2,900 if you're getting 12 points on DK, that's certainly viable at his price.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, 2,900, I like that price a lot. You look at that team total there, sitting pretty high. I mean, Buffalo, I kind of want to roll out like a Tyrod McCoy Clay stack because it's super cheap.
So what I've done I haven't fully built rosters yet, but I had to make one I played a few Thursday on DK games. I went McCoy, Clay, and Bills D in one, and I actually feel really good about that. like the best I felt about a Bills player starting since maybe like, you know, Lee Evans the week after he had his 200-yard first half in 2008. So, or whenever that was. But that's probably the most confident. And hey, that next week he caught like 2 passes. So that's probably a precursor to what's going to happen here. But Charles Clay, good play.
Yeah. There's definitely some Bills on the watch list here this week. Any kind of parting words you want to talk about here, or is it just these guys and log out?
So I mentioned 3 punts there that I am confident in. I really think you want to stick to Graham and Walker. I think that's super easy, especially on a week when, you're going to have high end options that you're really counting on. You want these high floor guys. I know in tournaments, floor's like a bad word basically, but you want some of these guys that are going to get the targets and are main guys in their offenses. So with Antonio Brown, I think Jimmy Graham's a great combination.
Yes, certainly. That's going to wrap it up for the Week 6 DraftKings tight end analysis. Be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. Check out our great tools and content. If you like what we're doing here with these videos, be sure to give our channel a subscribe. Throw us a couple thumbs up on the videos as well.